Gallus, Murmillo.
Murmillo, yeah. One of my favorite.
The Celtic Gauls followed a similar story to the Samnites. Gaulish warriors inspired a new type of gladiator called the Gallus. Like the Samnites, they were very popular, so rather than removing them from the spectacle entirely, they would be renamed to Murmillo. Gallus gladiators looked remarkably similar to Samnites, with only a couple of changes occurring, morphing them into the Murmillo. Their name has origins in a Greek word meaning sea fish.
Yep. You can see that on the helmet. That's how you identify a Murmillo. I'm gonna read the strength and weaknesses in a second.
Like many gladiators, a Gaul or Murmillo would be close to the equivalent of a heavyweight boxer. Their kit was not light, so it would be advantageous to be tall and strong.
So once again, strength is not a necessary. It's good. It's always advantageous in a fight to be strong and tall. We could discuss about that, but definitely being strong. The thing that I would like to say is that once again, I can wear the armament of a Murmillo, and I am nothing compared to Murmillo. It is true, however, that only the strong gladiators and bigger guys would belong to this specific class of gladiators. Now here it tells us they use a steel-plated helmet. Calling it a plated helmet is kind of weird, makes it sound like video game talk rather than history. Now, was it steel? Yeah, I mean, some was bronze, a lot of it was bronze. In fact, I don't know why they're choosing specifically steel, since there are plenty of museums in Naples, just Museum of Naples, just to mention one, that show absolutely Murmillo helmet, and they are bronze. Will there ever be steel versions? Yes, because the Romans did have access to steel, although then again, we're talking about low carbon steel. Sometimes it was wrought iron as well. But at the end of the day, it's very strange to make this decision, since the majority of Murmillo helmets specifically that are found in the historical record are either, in the archaeological leg, are either bronze or iron. And then we are told heavily armored, once again, I mean, compared to other gladiators. But then again, there are gladiators you'll see down the line that are more armored than them. Physical side of strength, yes, improved as the fight went on. I have no idea what this means at all. Weakness, so starter, not true. Poor speed due to weight, false. Relied on a primarily defensive strategy. Maybe, but this is arguable. And I'll tell you why in a second when we talk about a different type of gladiator, which is the Secutor, which is pretty much identical except for the type of helmet, but at least when it comes to the level of armament, and they were not slow and defensive, so it is what it is.
They had the standard loincloth, belt, scutum shield, gladius and manica, but their helmets featured feathered plumes and a large crest representing a dorsal fin. These helmets were sometimes very detailed with insignia, sculpture, and other
And this is only one type. I mean, it's not even a great representation of a Murmillo helmet. Let me show you a few others that I think are more appropriate because they will be more typical.
Intricate artwork. They definitely had a unique look with their silver armor, which was intended to represent the scales of a fish.
Okay.
Hoplomachus. Hoplomachus are pretty similar to the Samnites, except larger and more heavily armored. These men were tall, stocky, durable and strong. They needed great strength due to the heavy armor and extra weapons they carried.
Yeah, unfortunately he's going to repeat this myth throughout the entire video, I think. But when it comes to armor, strength is always good to have, but you don't need it in order to wear this type of armor, even all the way up to full plate medieval armor. I'm not a strong man. I can totally wear it for an entire day if needed, and even longer than that.
Rather than just one weapon, Hoplomachus could carry up to three. A gladius, a spear, and a pulgio.
Yeah.
A pulgio is a small auxiliary dagger typically used as a backup weapon. It's primarily made for...
How? I mean, I love the 3D, mate. But these lists here, these descriptions are terrible. How can someone you just said is heavily armored have a poor defense? Literally, they have range, which in itself is excellent for defense, by the way. They have a shield and they have a lot of armor. How does that translate to poor defense is beyond me.
The stabbing, and as a sidearm, it complemented the gladius well. Their spear was a highly effective, sophisticated piece of equipment. A bit of wood with some sharp metal on the end.
That is not sophisticated. I love the spear. It's my favorite weapon and my weapon of choice if I was asked to do a duel and I can have any weapon of antiquity. Just a piece of wood with it and then sophisticated. Which one is it? Because, I mean, spears, probably the spear is, I want to say, one of the, together with the mace, one of the earliest implements of hunting and war that mankind has created. It's definitely prehistorical.
In terms of armor, they had greaves protecting the lower two-thirds of their legs. Underneath was quilted padding. The heavy leg protection was in place to compensate for their small circular shield. This bronze shield was not only a defensive weapon, the Hoplomachus also used it to bash their opponents.
This is something that is constantly repeated when we talk about the buckler, for example. They say this a lot, or even the Roman scutum. They're like, oh, but you can use it to bash people in the head. You can use, I don't know how many times I have to repeat this, you can use, I don't know why you would, but you can use this Commodore 64 to bash someone in the head. And let me tell you, it will be quite effective. But that's a point, apparently. It's a point that makes people go, oh, you can use a shield to attack, not just to defend? Oh my gosh. I can't believe it.
They threw the entirety of their heavy weight behind it. This dealt serious damage as a blunt weapon.
This is ridiculous. They threw the entirety of their hoodie. Based on what? You're just making it up at this point, mate. Literally, throwing the entirety of your weight behind an attack is poor technique. At least if he had a source that said, you know, Plutarch or Polybius told us that. No, he just made that up. It is what it is. Thraex. I love the Thraex. Go.
For a foreign warrior, Thracian prisoners of war were unleashed in the arena and quickly became fan-favorite gladiators. Thracians and Hoplomachus were very similar and thus fought with a similar style. The main difference between the two was the iron-reinforced Thracian shield. This is called a parmula, a medium-sized shield, sometimes round, sometimes rectangular. Because the shield was still relatively small, low blows were a weakness due to the Thracians' large legs being exposed. To counteract this, they wore sturdy leg greaves and a manica on their dominant arm. Some Thracian helmets featured a griffin crest, a mythological creature often associated with Nemesis, the Greek goddess of retribution. If you're a keen observer, you may have noticed another unique piece of equipment.
Yeah, it's interesting that before he goes into that, of course, initially they would have been from Thracia, but then it becomes just a gladiator class. And so you can become a Thraex even if you're not from Thracia, you know, as a prisoner of war and whatnot. These all become just a class, a gladiator type.
Yes, that's right. The sword is not a gladius this time. This is a sica.
Yeah.
A sica is distinct from many other Roman weapons due to its slight bend. This was a special.
I don't know if I would call that slight, but now I'm being pedantic.
Especially useful when paired against a Murmillo gladiator opponent because
Okay, that's nice. Wait.
the sica's curve could sneak right past the edges of the scutum shield.
Okay, it's nice that he mentioned this, and I kind of want to say this. Did you notice how he says Thraex versus Murmillo? That is a very typical type of fight combination, because when we think about Roman gladiators, you really have to think about it a bit like a modern MMO or a video game where you have sort of prescribed classes and they fight against specific opponents because they want to balance the games. It is a gladiatorial game after all. So once they identified that some classes would be more fun to pit against others because of the fact that they would have advantages and disadvantages, and this would make for a more balanced fight, all the Romans doubled down on that. So initially the typical fight was Murmillo versus Thraex, but then at one point the opponent of the Murmillo becomes something else, specifically the Retiarius, which I'm sure they'll cover, so I'll wait for them to reach that one before I tell you why. But then the opponent of a Retiarius changes again. So we see the balancing to the games that happens with time. There he is.
Retiarius.
Yeah.
Retiarius is probably the most uniquely identifiable gladiator. His name literally means net man. He would have no shield, no helmet, and no sword. Instead, for armor, he would have a full-length manica on one arm and a galerius shoulder guard. If you think about it, he was damn near running around the arena naked, an armored sleeve and a loincloth for defense. In terms of his weapons, he carried a trident, a pugio dagger, and a net. Normally, gladiators only fought other combatants of similar sizes and styles. These vanilla matchups were seen as fair, even, and entertaining. Retiarius, however, would introduce a new level of excitement, unlike any gladiator before them. He would be the first to compete against entirely new classes, creating a new wave of thrilling, unpredictable bouts. He was often paired to fight with slower, heavier types like Murmillos, for instance. He would use his superior speed and swiftness to create separation with his long trident. This repurposed fishing tool was nearly 2 meters long, and its prongs were used to stab opponents or to pull away their weapons and armor.
Yeah, pull away the weapons and armor. Well, sure, I mean, you could make it work, I guess, but 2 meters long sounds a little excessive, but I don't exactly remember the average length of these, so I might have to double check that. I would like to underline that the trident is a poor weapon. Like, as a weapon, you're better off with a spear than a trident. In the hands of someone who was a good combatant and was training with it, it could still be extremely dangerous. But I think the best weapon of the Retiarius is his net. But before I tell you why, I want to see if he says it.
The prongs weren't sharp enough to pierce straight through metal, but they definitely hurt every time they landed. The Retiarius with the most skill and accuracy would target the open and vulnerable parts of their opponents. The very best Retiarius could spear their opponents through the small eye holes in their helmets. It didn't always go to plan though. If everything went wrong, a Retiarius would need to equip his dagger. As a last resort, a Retiarius would slide his hand deep into his loincloth and whip out his pugio.
What the heck?
A Retiarius probably hoped they never had to resort to this strategy mid-fight. If the fight became a close-quarters battle, they had virtually no chance of beating an armored opponent who had a sword and a shield. Pugio were most often used by Retiarius to finish off their disarmed opponent, who was on the ground, trapped in a net. This net was the only other form of offense that Retiarius had. A fisherman's net sounds like an absolutely rubbish weapon. If you lost your net and, God forbid, your trident, you'd have about as much chance of survival as a spectator wearing a bullseye print toga in a Sagittarius archery fight. If you threw out your net and it didn't entangle your opponent, you're pretty much screwed. Because of this, all Retiarius spent a very long time training and developing their net throwing skills. They'd throw their net using their offhand with an underhanded flicking motion, but this maneuver was high risk, high reward. If the net landed and caught the opponent, it was game over for him. Here's the risk. If he missed his opponent with a net throw, it was bad news. Bad news. Think about it, he'd literally be running around half naked with a trident, jabbing at his opponent's feet until he was inevitably cornered and caught. The rewards were huge for a successful Retiarius, but with this came a short shelf life. Everyone knew their faces and names if they strung together arena victories. The lack of a helmet and armor made them visible celebrities. Famous Retiarius were said to catch many young women in their nets. Outside the arena, of course. All they had to do was continue winning, and the riches and women would be lining up for them in droves. This would not be easy though. An aggressive, horrifying new competitor was designed specifically for them, forged out of the depths of Roman bloodlust. This relentless, haunting...
Roman bloodlust, now you're exaggerating. We all like combat sports, and when you watch MMA, are you a bloodlusting, disgusting human being? I don't think so. You're someone who likes combat like every other human male, I would say mostly, but there are women that like it too, on a smaller percentage, I suppose. But we like combat, and MMA can get really brutal. It's combat. It involves weapons, but then again, it is what it is.
Your opponent was set loose in the arena. His goal, make the life of a Retiarius as painful as possible.
Very nice. So one thing I wanted to say, the net was very effective against Murmillo, because if you look at the helmet, the other more typical Murmillo helmet that I showed, it has points. It has pointy parts. And that actually made it pretty easy for the net to catch, which means that once the net would catch on the helmet's points, then it would be really problematic for the Murmillo to remove that, and it could be really a problem, which means that that's why the Secutor was designed the way he was, with a smooth, rounded helmet with no edges for the net to catch onto. So the reality is, the Secutor, Retiari are broken, fix, next, patch, please, moment in ancient Rome. Let's see if he's going to say that about the helmet.
Secutor.
The music is good. Love it.
Let's put ourselves in the shoes of Retiarius. They open up the arena doors and you're now face to face with this chilling character. You're half naked, you've got a rubbish weapon.
Technically he's half naked too, if we really want to be pedantic about it.
Is it bold air quotes here? A weapon your local fisherman uses to catch fish. Oh, and you have a net. At least you know if it all falls apart, you can reach into your loincloth and unsheath your pugio. Alright, now it's time to fight. Go on, throw out your net. Good luck. Here's the first problem for our Retiarius. It's this menacing custom helmet. Looking at this helmet, what's your first thought? Yeah, I know it's freaky looking, but check this out. Okay, so the fight has started now, and you throw out your net.
The 3D model looks really, really good. I like it a lot. Maybe if the helmet was sitting a little lower, would have been more realistic in my opinion, but it's looking very nice.
It's the big moment, and yes, nailed it. It's a bullseye, a perfect headshot. All that training has paid off, but don't celebrate yet, Retiarius. The helmet is so smooth and streamlined that the bloody net slides straight off it.
Yeah.
Would you want to be a Retiarius trying to throw a fisherman's net over this thing?
No.
No, absolutely bloody not, right?
No.
It's intentionally designed with smooth curves. They act as a kryptonite to the weighted net. But that's not all. This helmet has another trick up its sleeve. Look at these creepy eye holes. It's not easy to get the prongs of a trident through like some of the previous helmets. However, these helmets were not perfect. The Secutor inside could barely see a thing. A really bad time with it.
I don't know though. I disagree with that completely. I think actually his vision would be pretty good. There are some of the helmets that I own that may have even a lower degree of sight than this, but I can still see pretty well. So I disagree with that. I think his side sight would be pretty good, and his frontal sight would be really good. The only sight that would be compromised in this case is the lower part here. But remember, it happens as well with my frogmouth helmet. It also has this area compromised, but you can always look down when you really need to. So weakness, visibility, no, I disagree. But I mean, that's just me. Of course, let me know what you think in the comments.
The nimble, unarmored opponent darting around you. Made of solid bronze metal, they were back-breakingly heavy. The Secutor
Oh, what? The helmet is back-breakingly heavy? Listen, mate, the frogmouth I have is a beast, okay? That's almost, I want to say 8 or 9 kilograms. That thing is a monster. It's on the heavy end, even for joust specialized gear. And I can wear it, once it's in my head and is connected, I can wear it no problem. And these would have been absolutely much lighter than that. So no, that's another massive myth you're pushing out. These were not, what did he say? Back-breakingly heavy. That's nonsense.
Feel its weight after no time.
Nah.
Career Secutors, men who spent their lives as these gladiators, they probably developed the crippling forward head posture of a smartphone-addicted teenager.
I don't know what he's on about.
Helmets were also form-fitted to the head.
Yeah, he's making up a lot of facts. He's making out a lot of facts just because he looks at these and says something that he thinks. That's not how you... I don't mean to be mean. Okay? I don't mean to be mean. I understand this is mostly for entertainment. I have nothing against them. Please don't attack them nor harass them. But the reason why it annoys me a little bit is because when you want to say something like this, I know it takes time, I know it takes effort, but you need to back it up with sources. You need to back it up with sources. So if you want to be... Of course, some things you can, like when he talks now about awful ventilation, well, sure, I can give you that since there is a solid plate of bronze. But now I hope he's not going to say they couldn't breathe after 10 minutes, they had to remove it. Like, well, let's see. I don't want to speak, but I think there is a massive lack of source inspection when it comes to the production of this video.
Head of a Secutor and had awful ventilation, so very little air got in. Wearing this helmet, you could barely breathe.
Yeah, I knew it. I knew it. You see, guys, I'm not, this is, the oxygen was suffocating. Like, come on. It's nonsense. The air can come from back here. The air comes from the ocularia as well. It's not gonna suffocate. Oh my gosh.
Oxygen was suffocatingly scarce. The lack of ventilation also caused you to cook under the hot Roman sun.
Please.
Your brain began to boil as if a heavy form-fitted bronze oven was encased around your skull.
Right.
The helmet was horrifically cramped. You'd feel trapped inside of it. Your only way out, through your opponent's defeat or a painful death.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure this is nicely written when it comes to like a dramatic scene, but it's nonsense.